Hello, my name is Mark Hansen. I'm superintendent of the Eastland School District located here in Lanark and Shannon, Illinois. And my presentation today is on measuring student growth to improve learning outcomes for students. I want to share with you some of the lessons we've learned here at Eastland as early implementers of student growth measures. Eastland's a small district here in the northwest part of the state. We were one of 32 race to the top districts in Illinois. Our Teachers Association and Board of Education agreed to participate in Race to the Top, and at least 3 of the initiatives that we were required to complete as a Race to the Top district had to do directly with this idea of measuring student growth. The first important lesson that we learned is that leadership matters. I think we all know that teachers and professionals are like students in that they can quickly tell if the task that they're being required to do requires them to make to comply or to do something more than just comply. Measures of growth are bound to fail in any school where the leader introduces them as a statutory requirement or, like some hoop that has to be jumped through. It starts by building awareness. America has always had a way of viewing measurement that is, you could say, competitive or capitalistic. It's really based on the idea of making external comparisons to determine how well one is doing. But there's an inherent limitation in this view. To put it simply, measuring my performance in relation to someone else's does not tell me anything about the progress that I have made. Growth can only be measured by comparing my performance to my previous performance. The realization of just how embedded this thinking is brings me to the second lesson that we've learned, that using measures of student growth is a huge paradigm shift in our schools, particularly in our secondary schools. If you think about it this way, the traditional view of growth is a focus on rank or status. It designates students as winners and losers. It encourages external motivation. It often leads to them explaining or making excuses for their failures. And it can give good students an inflated sense of worth, or poor students just the opposite. Often undermines the confidence of those with less ability and gives false confidence or a false level of confidence to those for whom learning comes easy. But when you focus on growth, everybody can be successful. The motivation is typically internal. It usually requires the person to think about and own their outcomes. It typically results in more reflective practice and thinking about how can I improve. And finally, it pushes people of widely different abilities to continue improving relative to their past performance. I don't know if there's anywhere where this paradigm is more embedded than in our system for grading. Think about traditional grades in schools. They're assigned by the teacher. They're based entirely on the teacher's content. They use an instrument developed by the teacher, or they're grades for homework. And often, they may not reflect whether the student has actually mastered the skills that the teacher was supposed to be teaching in the course. But as we move towards standards-based reporting, we will be evaluating student learning through assessments that are based on common standards shared among teachers of the same subject. Those groups and those assessments will be developed by groups of teachers, and it's supposed to, anyways, more accurately reflect the extent to which students have mastered the skills and content of a given course. But paradigms are stubborn things. You have to remember that many of the things in our schools, the existing structures, are really evidence of how embedded the old way of thinking is. Think about GPA or class rank, or the idea that you can identify the top 10% of the learners in the school. A valedictorian or salutatorian, or a 3.5 club, or weighted grades, or honor rolls, or college prep tracks or vocational tracks. I think all of these things that are more common in our secondary schools are a good indication of just how embedded the thinking is when it comes to measures. So, because these paradigms are so rigid, our leaders have to be prepared for resistance when they introduce this. No, although people will claim it, using data does not mean that relationships no longer matter. It doesn't mean that test results are all that matters, and it does not mean that we are engaged in high-stakes testing. In reality, teaching really still is about relationships, but you have to think about it this way. It's about the ability to build positive relationships with every kid, and then to leverage those relationships for improved outcomes. And the only way to know if those outcomes are improving is to measure student progress. Which brings me to the last big lesson that we learned, that there are no shortcuts in implementation. To measure growth effectively, a school must align its curriculum and instruction. It must identify the essential skills, use multiple measures to determine if students are meeting those skills, jointly develop an evaluation plan with administrators and staff, align their evaluation tool to Danielson's framework, design a method for factoring student growth into those ratings, and then pilot this for a couple of years in a no-stakes way so that it's less threatening and more likely to lead to discussion and improvement. And then finally, they have to track and norm student growth over time so they know what is a reasonable expectation for levels of growth. At Eastland, when we aligned curriculum instruction to the Common Core, we've done this in an incremental way, taking one subject at a time. We did math in 13-14, reading and language arts this year, and we'll be doing science next year. And in each of these areas, we hired an outside facilitator to help our teachers do this work. And we paid them for some of their time in the summer when they were less stressed by other requirements. And we also gave them additional staff development on school improvement and institute days. And those facilitators that we hired, we actually brought them back to the school to observe the teachers and to give them feedback. And we formally required all of our teachers to start using I can statements that were aligned to the Common Core standards. Even with that done, we knew it was important to narrow our focus. Not every standard is of equal importance, and not every standard can be assessed in a reasonable amount of time. So we hired kids at the core to work with our teachers to develop local assessments to measure growth in the essential skills of a given subject. And again, we used the summer months to do this, and we paid our staff to come in and do the work. And we've been implementing that on a trial basis this year. And to be frank, we've taken a step back, and we're working to improve those assessments because we have determined or decided that the quality of them still was not to the level we needed them to be. This is an example of the checklist we've developed to assess or evaluate the type 3 assessments that the teachers are making to make sure that they are rigorous. We're operating from the idea or the belief, you could say, that backward design is the key. If our teachers develop rigorous assessments of the essential skills and standards for their courses, we believe that they will design and teach lessons that bring students to master those skills. So we think these assessments are the very first step, and that it's really critical that they be good assessments, good quality, rigorous assessments. But we also know it's important to use multiple measures. In Eastland, we're using the MAP test, and we are also using those local assessments. And we are working with our joint committee to determine what merits different levels of performance rating. Unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or excellent. We've been working for 3 years now on our evaluation plan. We worked with a joint committee of 3 administrators and 3 teachers. We started with models from other districts, and we've always treated the plan as a working document. And every time that we make edits or improvements, it goes to all the staff for feedback, before it goes to the board for approval. We aligned our tool to Danielson's, and we customized it to our district. For example, we're in a one-to-one district in terms of technology. It's an important initiative in our district, and we think it's important that some of our components in the evaluation tool evaluate teachers' use of instructional technology. And we had to design a method for taking the student growth data, quantifying it, and factoring it into teachers' ratings. We did this also through the Joint Committee. We looked at our own results internally, not outside, not externally, but internally, over time, and we determined what merited certain ratings. And we've been trying it out for 2 years now. So here you can see the kind of report that our teachers get. This would be the summative rating page of a multi-page document whereby student growth is measured and incorporated into the final rating. Here you can see that Jane Doe received a performance rating of excellent when she was observed by her principal, which is a rating of 4. And that counts for 70% of her overall rating. Then you can see that on her math science test, her students, somewhere between 51 and 57% of the students met their growth target, which is needs improvement by district standards, so she got a 2 in that category. But on her type 3 assessment, her locally developed assessment, between 57 and 63% of the students met their growth target, which counts as a 3 or a proficient. And when you average all of that together, with the growth measures accounting for 30% of the overall rating, we get a 3.55 or a proficient rating. We're still working with this, but we're confident that we've brought the teachers along all the way and that they understand how we came up with these numbers, that they're based on our own performance levels within the district, and that therefore they should be fair over time. As I said before, we've been piloting this now for 2 years, and next year will be the first year that the student growth data will actually account in the teacher's final rating. Finally, it's important that we keep tracking the data over time so that we can accurately determine what percentage of students meeting their targets would merit proficiency or excellence or needs improvement or unsatisfactory performance. This is an example of what we do. We simply take every teacher's percentages of students meeting growth targets, we list them, we average them, and we determine what the district average is. In this case, for 13-14, about every teacher averaged about 60% of their students meeting their growth target. You can see that we did better in math, not as well in language arts and reading, but that 60% was the average. So if you go and look at our proposed rating ranges, you will see that we made 57% to 63% the proficient range, because that sandwiches that average of 60 in the middle. And then we created ranges for the other 4 rating categories. In summary, using student growth measures to improve outcomes for our students in our schools requires a commitment from our leaders who believe in the value of the work. If the people leading this do not believe in it, it's going to fail. Number 2, a respect for the paradigm shift and the perseverance that it's going to require in the face of resistance, frankly, from everyone, potentially, about doing this. And then lastly, it really requires the time and the resources to plan thoroughly and implement with an attention to quality first. It has to be about quality. Just running through these steps is not going to make a difference. The last thing I'd like to say is that I think the process, what we have learned is that the process needs to be inclusive and reflective, building on experience to modify the plan in ways that make it fair and effective. What we continue to talk about is that we want the teachers to feel that what is being done is fair to them, a fair way to evaluate performance. And we also want to all be engaged in the process of determining, is this working? Are we improving our teaching? Are more students learning and meeting standards because of what we are doing? And if they are, then it's a good thing. Um, thank you. Thank you for your time. Hope this was valuable to you, and you can feel free to contact me if you like. Thank you.